Now, welcome to BizTech's Jobs and Careers show, where we discuss issues and topics related to jobs and careers across the Asia-Pacific region. Today, we discuss the Great Resignation and Talent Uprising globally. And to give us some expert insights, we speak to Stephen Hickey, APAC Regional Leader at Kincentric. Now, Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Lovely to be here.
Now, Stephen, let's start by you giving us an overview of Kincentric and your role across the region.
Sure, thanks very much. So at Kincentric, we are part of the Spencer Stuart family of businesses. We are a human capital advisory firm. So our clients will bring us in to help them solve their most important people-related challenges, especially as they pertain to topics like organizational culture, leadership, particularly scaled leadership at every level in their organization's hierarchy, issues around end-to-end talent management, the employee experience, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we bring a range of data-driven advisory solutions to help our clients really accelerate the pace of positive change inside of those areas inside their business.
Okay, and so this is getting you on the show is really relevant because I want to first zoom in on something that's dominating the HR global conversation, the Great Resignation. Now, from a Kincentric point of view, give us some insights into what has been the catalyst for this and what has been some of the impact on businesses across the world.
Yeah, well, it's a big topic, and you're right, Brian. It's certainly dominating a lot of conversations that we're having with clients right the way through Asia and globally as well. I think, one way we really think about it is that it's probably more than just a time of mass exits or great resignation risk inside of organizations. I think that's part of it, but I think we're seeing something bigger than that as well. Our work with clients and in our experience is, I think we're really seeing a fundamental shift in employee expectations around their organization. A lot of people are really taking time now to reflect on how they've been led and supported and nurtured by their organization through the last 2 years of the pandemic. And with that, I actually think a lot of people want to see really meaningful change and progress inside of their organization. We know a lot of people are self-reflecting on their values, their motivations, their preferences around work-life balance preferences, the kind of work they want to do, where they want to do it, how they want to do it, who they want to do it with. So that's why I think what we're seeing here is a real evolution in talent management practices. So a part of that is the need to manage resignation risk. And that's a big part of some of the work we've been doing with clients, is to help them get really microscopic on segments of their workforce where that resignation risk factor might be a little higher than in other parts of the business. But it's bigger than that. It's also an opportunity here to really reevaluate how an organization aligns talent, gets people really aligned with the culture that they need to execute strategy, and looks forward in their talent management practices, as opposed to looking back necessarily at how we did things pre-pandemic.
Okay, Stephen, I want to draw a distinction now. In my research, I think a key thing that you've brought up in one of your white papers is the talk of talent uprising. Could you make the distinction between the Great Resignation and the talent uprising?
Yeah. So we just authored a paper on this just recently to really good feedback from our clients. So as I said, I think Great Resignation is very much about managing that risk of what we are seeing in a number of markets where greater levels of turnover inside of organizations than in recent history. But I think the issue here is actually just bigger than that. We are seeing people reevaluate their motivations, their values, their preferences, their desires. And with that, it's a really big opportunity here for organizations to be really evolving their talent management practices. There's actually a great opportunity for competitive advantage.
Yeah, I want to just stop you there to interrupt you a little bit, because one of the fascinating things that a phrase that caught my attention when I was reading your white paper was really triage your talent management philosophy. Now, tell us a little bit more about that. And it seems to resonate with me quite a lot.
Yeah, it really captures people's attention. I think it hits on a really important theme. So what we're talking about here is the need to get, really focused on segments of the organization that, add the most value to the business, and get really, really targeted and perhaps even double down in talent management practices on those segments that add, the most amount of value or productivity or outcomes to the client. So, a phrase we talk a lot about and encourage our clients to think about is moments that matter for segments that matter. So, thinking about what are those moments through the employee experience that are really, really important, disproportionately more important to the segments of your workforce that add extra value to your customers, to business results, and so forth. And then what you want to do in any organization is make sure that you're delivering a differentiated experience to people who occupy roles that are in these segments that make the biggest impact to the outcomes that the client, that the company is trying to deliver.
So this is interesting because it's kind of different from the traditional HR thinking around HR policies. Essentially, what you're saying now is, hey, for different segments of the business, and it's not geographical, but really how they contribute to the bottom line, we've got to manage each of these little groups differently and find out what makes them tick and what motivates them.
Yeah, I'll give you an example that's top of mind. I'm seeing this in a couple of our clients through Asia at the moment, Brian, is the high performer population. So these are high performers by virtue of the feedback that a company has been sending to them, perhaps based on performance ratings, differentiated rewards and bonus outcomes that these individuals might be receiving. A challenge I'm seeing in many of our clients is that the high performer population is not necessarily any more engaged than the rest of the population. Now, this is a problem because these are people that by virtue of the organization's own definition are delivering the most value and outcomes. So what we're really encouraging clients in that scenario to be thinking through is, how do you deliver a really intentional and differentiated experience to these high performers? How do you make them feel even more engaged with the direction that the organization is going, the role that they've got to play in that, so that their performance continues at really high levels and their stickiness and commitment to your organization continues, because they're high performers. They're probably highly likely to be fielding the odd call here or there from a headhunter or a recruitment or a competitor. You want them to stay with your business and not move somewhere else.
Now, Stephen, which brings me to my next question, really. When you look at the data, where are the resignations coming from in terms of, if you look at it from a regional perspective, is it among the high performers? Is it among specific industries? Tell us more.
Yeah, I think at country level, like many things in Asia, will really vary, and even globally. We are seeing some markets. The US is a good example, where resignation rates really do seem to be higher than what they've perhaps been traditionally. So it will vary. I think certain skills continue to be in really hot demand. So tech skills, digital skills, they continue to be really hot demand around Asia, especially. I think skills where perhaps it is now a little bit less about where the role is based. So one of the things with this big shift to remote-based working or hybrid-based working, many companies are really trying to embrace that by tapping into new talent pools. So where there are jobs where they're able to look beyond perhaps a traditional view of proximity to the office, now there are companies really trying to get out in front of that and look into new geographies, new locations, new markets for that sort of talent, where they can be thinking first and foremost about what's the best talent that I need to fill the role, as opposed to starting with where is this person based. So it's a very, very different way of thinking about it. But we do see variability in resignation rates around the region and around particular skills as well, Brian.
And where do you, and if you look at, let's say Singapore, for example, where, and I want to zoom in on Singapore because literally that's an employees market right now. In specific industries, there's just a shortage of talent. How have employers reacted in terms of their talent acquisition strategies?
Yeah, I think a few things we're seeing a renewed focus on. Firstly, would be around the employee value proposition. So, you think of the employee value proposition just like you would your customer value proposition. It really acts as a magnet to attract best talent into the organization. So, we are starting to see a real uptick in organizations recrafting what's the value proposition that they have to current and prospective employees, so that acts as a magnet to attract best talent into their company. Second is a real renewed focus on organizational culture. For a long time, I think we've known that culture can be a real differentiator inside of an organization, both in terms of driving higher levels of engagement, but also driving higher levels of organizational performance. We know through our client work that aligned cultures grow substantially faster in terms of revenue growth, EBITDA, profit growth. So culture, there's a really renewed focus on making sure that we've got inside of our company a really differentiated culture, that it attracts the best talent into the company, that it retains best talent inside of the company. So big focus on EVP, big focus on organizational culture. And I think the third one, Brian, would be big focus on generating engaging leadership at all levels in an organization's hierarchy. We've got to have leaders who are aligned to strategy, who are showing great levels of care and concern and empathy for the difficult circumstances that many people are still working through. But having highly engaging, highly effective leaders at every level in the hierarchy can be another big source of competitive advantage and act as another ability to attract great talent into your organization.
And Stephen, and I want to add to that, because just in terms of people that we have on the show every day, one of the key things that I think has come across is the fact that, you highlighted this in terms of leadership and in terms of the culture of organizations. Employees have remembered or have shared how companies have looked after them over the period of the pandemic, over the last 2 years. So the companies that have been able to then retain better, basically, if you look back on it, they did all the right things a year and a half ago to retain their employees and engage them, to support them in terms of mental health, for simple things which seem simple at that time, but then were very, very effective. Mental health support, either digitally or physically, as well as technology support to do their business, to do their work better.
Yeah, that's right. And Brian, we've been tracking really closely employee engagement levels right the way through this pandemic. And you're spot on. We picked up in our data very early on that people had, we saw engagement levels going up in the first couple of months post the pandemic really getting to a global scale. And we attribute a lot of that to, leaders did a great job of showing up, being front and center, communicating really openly and effectively about how they were going to try to support people through the early stages of the pandemic. We saw a lot of quick and big investment in tools and technology that would enable people to, successfully complete their work from a location other than the traditional workplace. What we've seen since is engagement levels sort of bouncing around a little bit, as we've seen, the pace of the pandemic change. We've had, particularly here in Asia, we've had moments where caseloads have gone extremely high, so they've led to prolonged lockdowns in a number of locations. That's put a lot of pressure on people's work experience. We've also seen scenarios with our clients, and we've been asked to come in to help intervene in these situations, where some leaders have really struggled to keep pace with the very humanistic form of leadership that is required now to support people through the pandemic, but also post-pandemic. So, if you think about the role and the ask of middle managers before the pandemic, a lot of expectation on middle managers to drive frontline performance, set goals, give feedback, drive training and development, learning and development, give lots of recognition, all that sort of stuff. Think now about what we need of middle managers. It's all those areas, and we need them to be helping people to navigate hybrid. We need managers to be helping people through their natural and understandable anxieties with safety, with mental health, We need middle managers to be showing a high degree of care and compassion for people, help them to navigate the tricky work-life balance pressures that I think we're all experiencing as, you know, the lines between professional lives and personal lives have become extremely blurred. So we are asking a lot more of middle managers today than I think we've almost ever asked of them. And we are seeing a little bit of a risk here in our employee feedback data that we capture globally, where, you know, I'm seeing that senior leader levels of engagement, so executives, they're actually rebounding and are higher than they were pre-pandemic. But the middle manager population has yet to return to pre-pandemic levels of engagement. So I'm a little concerned inside of many organizations that we're going to see this growing gap or discrepancy between senior leaders who are feeling really confident about the future direction that their organization is taking, but the risk of leaving middle managers behind. So that's a big area of intervention.
And so, Stephen, then how would you recommend HR leaders across the region deal with this issue? Because obviously you flagged something that, because you have visibility across the region in terms of data, that maybe many companies haven't picked up on yet.
Yeah, I think a couple of things I'd encourage all your listeners to be thinking about. Number one is, this is not just a HR problem. I actually think this is a fundamental business problem. So, you know, you really want to get CEOs, C-suite buy-in. CEOs and C-suite cannot successfully execute strategy through people without having all levels of leadership tightly aligned around the direction that we're going, the strategies that we're going to put in place to get there, and the culture that we need to successfully execute that plan. So I guess number one is you don't want to be sort of flicking this issue just to the HR function. It's just got to be led and owned by the business overall, number one. I think number two is getting very focused on the changing expectations and accountabilities of leaders at every level in the hierarchy. So you want to be getting really clear on what do we expect and how we're going to hold our senior leadership team to account on how we're going to lead people over the next 6 to 12 months, for example. You want to then think about direct reports into the executive team. What do we expect of them and how are we going to hold them to account? Middle managers, what do we expect of them? How are we going to hold them to account? And how are we going to support them? A lot of those areas that I mentioned just before, these are new skills. These are not areas that we necessarily have a huge amount of muscle memory in yet. And there's a lot of test and learn and trial and error going on. So I think for that sort of senior to middle manager cohort, there's a huge amount of support that is required. So that's where clients are often bringing us in to help build those skills and those capabilities into leaders so they can do what's always been required of them in the traditional sense of leadership, and build a lot of those change and adaptable leadership styles and humanistic forms of leadership that are really required to steer people through the situation that we continue to find ourselves in at the moment.
So Stephen, now in 2022, as we've just finished Chinese New Year and recruiting season is just started, resignations probably have already started as well with people moving jobs. What are key things that you would advise employers to be cognizant of in 2022 in terms of talent acquisition?
Yep, and I should say to everybody listening in a happy new year and good prosperity in the year of the tiger. I think a couple of things I'd encourage everybody to be thinking about. Number one, this is a really good opportunity to revisit your end-to-end talent strategy. It's a really good opportunity to look at what's our philosophy for talent? What's our philosophy on leadership? What do we expect of leaders? What are the accountabilities that are evolving and changing as we take our business forward? So I think number one, great time to really look at your end-to-end approach and strategy around leadership and talent. I think secondly, Brian, again, really good opportunity to have a look at your culture, revisit the culture. It's a really big enabler of strategy and business outcomes, as we've talked about. So as strategy is evolving, as companies are thinking about, how do we grow our business coming out of the pandemic? And let's hoping we're sort of closer to the end than the beginning. As strategy is evolving, so too must the culture that enables that strategy. So I think second thing I'd encourage everybody to look at is getting really intentional about the culture that you now need to execute that strategy, because it may very well be different to the culture that was in place before the pandemic or even through the earlier years of the pandemic. So double down on the leadership and talent strategy, and I'd say double down on really refreshing the culture that's required to execute the business strategy.
Now, Stephen, it's been a fascinating conversation and very, very informative. But before we leave, could you share some final thoughts with us?
Sure. So as I said there, I think, we think of the situation that many organizations find themselves in right now as a really big opportunity to refresh and overhaul how our clients are thinking about their end-to-end approach to talent management. So, as I just closed before, great opportunity to think about your end-to-end leadership and talent strategy, great opportunity to think about the culture that's going to be required to execute that strategy, and a great opportunity to get people feeling really engaged and motivated and passionate about the future direction that your organization is embarking on. So big focus area on those three things. And I think companies will be in great shape to deliver really good business outcomes through people.
Stephen, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
It's been a pleasure, Brian. Thanks very much.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Stephen Hickey, the Asia Pacific Regional Lead at Kincentric, on BizTech's Jobs and Careers Show. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our various social media platforms. Please visit our website for great content on business and technology conversations ranging from market and investor news, leadership, wealth management, and technology. Thank you very much for tuning in.